Welcome, everybody, to a late night edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are two retired New York City police detectives, and if you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, consider hitting that subscribe button and hitting that notification bell so you'll get all things DutyRon and Ed Wallace when we go live or upload another video. Welcome back, Ed. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you just got in from Africa, 2 weeks over in doing Army training overseas and doing your stuff. So thank you so much for taking out the time. Everyone misses you, Ed. How was your trip?
It was a great trip. A lot of great people I met and worked with while I was there. And I'm happy to be back, though. I just flew in yesterday, and boy, are my arms tired.
Yeah. And guess what? You've come into quite a bit of forensics. We're talking about this massacre that happened last Sunday over in Moscow, Idaho, outside a university, off-campus location. 4 young souls taken just 7 days ago in a couple of short hours. It'll be 7 days. A horrific crime scene, and Ed, I said to myself, who better than Ed Wallace to be here, because this is a huge 6-bedroom home that a crime scene of this magnitude. We're going to get into it. Before we really get into this conversation, I want to say thank you to the Patreon supporters, the channel members, the subscribers, the moderators, the replay viewers, and everybody that engages with Ed Wallace and I. It's really what makes this a great place. And Ed and I really want to give thanks and praise to each and every one of you for being willing to learn about what goes on behind the scenes, because on Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, that's what we do. We help to let you guys understand what goes into these cases and the evidence collection and DNA and forensics and crime scene analysis. That's Ed's expertise. And I can't go anywhere else and get the information that we get from somebody like Ed. So I want to just jump quickly right into your thoughts on this crime scene, because we're going to go over the forensics. That's the title of this live broadcast, this live interactive show. I want to get from Ed his take on what he would do at a crime scene like this. But first, your take on it, Ed.
Well, I was following the case when I was over in Marrakesh, Morocco. In fact, some of the news articles I was watching said that the FBI behavioral science team was out there helping, assisting, doing some profiling. I was actually with an active FBI profiler in Morocco. She was there for another reason, but I just found it kind of odd how quickly they got involved in this case. But you have 4 people murdered to death by knife. And that's a very up close and personal thing, to stab somebody to death. And there's a whole forensic psychology profile on people who do such acts. Anyhow, so getting over, looking at it and everything, and this was some type of entry through allegedly through a glass sliding door. If that's still the case, because it seems like things have been changing from initial reports and press conferences on the case. Now we find out that several of the victims actually drove home or were driven home from where they were that night. Now they were on the second floor of bedrooms and found in their bed apparently when the attack occurred. And there's media footage of through the window of the bedrooms with the crime scene investigators in their PPE, their personal protective equipment, their Tyvek suits and so forth, processing these bloody scenes. And apparently there was so much blood that it leaked under the framing of the house on top of the concrete foundation through that and dripped down the exterior concrete foundation wall.
Yeah, I showed that today, Ed, and you and I reviewed those photographs. And, that to me, when we speak about Crime Scene 101, the time frame from when this these quadruple murders were reported, and the estimated time that this occurred between 3 a.m. on the 13th to 4 a.m. And they estimated that because the the phone calls that were being made from one of the decedents, they stopped at between around 3 o'clock. So they estimated 3 to 4 a.m. and then the call didn't come in till 12 noon Sunday afternoon. And it was an unknown person who discovered these bodies, not the two girls who were sleeping in another bedroom in a different location in the house. And that's why we have a situation where a large amount of blood could seep through the foundation. And you made a statement to me before we went live. You called it something else, but it's like, for in layman's terms, the where the foundation of the house and the wood sits.
Yeah, so you have the framing of the house. It's sitting on top of, it's bolted to the concrete foundation, and it's called a sill plate. So apparently there was so much blood that it got under the wall, under the floor, onto this sill plate, and out into the exterior of the location, and dripping down the concrete foundation on the exterior of the house. Yeah, there it is.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's how horrific this crime scene is, and many of the investigators and many people who have been interviewed talked about, and especially the coroner, who Barbara Butcher left me a message and sent me a couple of texts. That the coroner is a registered nurse, but she made a statement of it's the most amount of blood and the most horrific crime scene that she's ever seen, and this is indicative of that. Ed, have you ever seen anything like that?
Oh, I've had plenty of really bloody crime scenes. Oh my God, I had a kid that came off his psych meds, dismember his parents after a dispute because they wouldn't let him take the car out the night. And he took him, stabbed him to death, brought him down into the basement, and started dismembering them, trying to flush their body parts down the various toilets of the house until he
Oh,
clogged all the drains. But the blood was so deep in the basement that it was up to my ankles.
yeah. Oh
So
my,
needed boots. Anyhow, yeah, I've seen all kinds of bloody crime scenes. Again, most of them were knife attacks. And when I see when I see that amount of blood, one of the first things I do after I put on my tie-back suits and gloves and booties and everything is I make a beeline to the medicine chest in the bathroom, to
yeah.
kind of look for medications that would help me identify the health conditions of the people that were potentially bleeding in here, so I can learn if there's any potential diseases I need to protect myself from.
My God, my gosh. Hey, so many people in the chat are reacting to this, and this is the harsh reality of the job. I want to say thank you to the super chatters. Indy McDuff, in memory of Dennis Waters, he would want this solved. That's the Team Waters diving. He passed away a few weeks ago. Thank you for that, Indy McDuff. Susan King sends in the $20 super chat. She says, yesterday, Little Harmony, Montgomery in New Hampshire, the step monster, Kayla Montgomery, accepted a plea deal. I hope you'll cover this. Absolutely. And Laura Shortleg sent in a $50 super sticker. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Hey, Ed, again, I want to just get back to the crime scene 101. We have some footage that we're going to play, but this, again, this blood leakage from the side of the home is a clear and up and in your face reminder of how bloody and horrifying this crime scene was to the first responders. When you have police that are called to the scene for an unconscious, they were called to the scene for an unconscious victim. What do you hope for as a crime scene unit investigator, as somebody who's collecting forensic evidence? What's your hopes in that the first responders, this starts with the first responding unit. What's some of your hopes that they would do with the proper protocol, Ed?
Well, first and foremost, life safety comes first. So the crime scene takes a back seat to that. So, you have multiple agencies that would typically respond to a scene like this here in New York. You'd have the fire department, you'd have emergency medical service, which is now a part of the fire department. It used to be independent. Um, emergency response agency for some time in my career until they were merged with the fire department later. And then you have law enforcement. So when these emergency responders enter the crime scene, the crime scene is going to be altered in some way, shape, or form, and some evidence is going to be disturbed, if not altered, damaged, or destroyed. It just happens. Life safety comes first. So EMS priority is to save these victims' lives, not to maintain the crime scene and the evidence. I get that. But that doesn't give you a license to be a bull in a china shop.
Right.
So, you go in understanding that you're entering a crime scene, be mindful of forensic evidence. And again, we use that RAIN principle: recognize, avoid, isolate, and notify, for all the emergency responders when it comes to forensic evidence. Typically, the first type of forensic evidence that gets destroyed is footwear impressions that might be on the ground, on the wood, on the carpet, tile, not carpet per se, but tile. And wood, things like that. But now you have the addition of blood. And what typically happens at these very bloody crime scenes is the initial emergency responders, when they're rushing in there, they're not going to stop and say, "Oh, let me put on some booties." They're not going to do that. They're just going to walk in there with their duty shoes on, their boots, or whatever the case may be. And they, given the nature of this crime scene and how much blood was present, there's no doubt in my mind they probably had to walk through blood to get to these victims. And then in doing so, when they're now moving around after working on the victims, they're going to leave blood trails. So I would have to identify all the emergency responders that were there, and then eliminate all the bloody footwear that is left behind by their emergency response to the scene. And typically what happens is EMS, if the victims were wearing clothing, well, they're going to cut that clothing off to get to the wounds and start treating the wounds. If they worked on the victims, typically in New York, if you work on a victim, you start CPR or some kind of thing like that, then you have to take the victim out. You can't, you take them out and put them in the, we call it the bus, the ambulance, and you take them to the hospital. And so that body is removed. But typically, if the body is removed, the clothing that was cut off is left behind. And so now I'm going to have to piece that puzzle all back together again and document it. I'd have to develop a clean work area, lay down some clean paper, put the article of clothing on it, and try to piece the puzzle back together to make it look like the original intact clothing, and photograph it, document all the stab wound locations, measure that up on the clothing. And in this case, they were in bed. So if you have bedding involved too, and they were stabbed through the bedding, a quilt, a blanket, sheets, whatever the case may be. And according to autopsy reports I've read, that there were several of the victims had defensive wounds. So it appears that they may have fought back to some degree. And I'd have to document all of those wounds on the victim's hands. Then we'd have to bag those hands, put them in paper bags, and take the paper bags to their wrists so that they go to the autopsy with any evidence underneath their fingernails preserved. Because if they struggled with the suspect, maybe they scratched the skin, or hairs and fibers from the victim's clothing, suspect's clothing has been obtained underneath the nails and so forth. We don't deal with that at the scene. We let that in a controlled laboratory setting, such as the morgue, deal with examining underneath the fingernails and things of that nature. Now, in this attack, if this perpetrator is said to have used some type of knife, long blade knife, they're looking at hunting knives. I mean, I heard some crazy stories about them going to hunting stores and camping stores to see about recent purchases of knives, to try to kind of connect that. I don't know. But typically, though, if a knife does not have a safety guard between the handle and the blade, in the knife attack, it's very simple and easy for an assailant stabbing somebody with a knife to hit a bone under the inside of the victim, rather, and then it immediately stops the forward momentum of the knife. But since there's no guard there, then the suspect's hand slides forwards and can slice his hand open on the blade, and then that would cause additional bloodletting. And you have to have training in bloodstain pattern analysis to understand You might see blood drops that cannot be accounted for by the victims, and then you would have to say, okay, well, this is potentially the suspects, and you'd want to collect that obviously for DNA. And if there's a blood trail, you'd want to follow that trail to wherever it leads and see if there was, maybe the suspect went to the bathroom or a kitchen and tried to render aid to themselves, and stop that bleeding, or whatever the case may be.
Ed, I was curious too to get your thoughts on contamination and cross contamination. And when I say this for our listening audience, and thank you to everybody who's here. And if you wait till the end of this, we're going to open it up to a 15-minute Q&A. So if you want to wait till the end, Ed and I will take some questions from the audience. I'm talking about the people who came at 12 noon or whenever it was and discovered this horrific crime scene and called 911 and said, hey, we have a problem here. Is there a way to eliminate, or do they not eliminate those people? Because anybody that enters that crime scene before law enforcement is a part of the crime scene, right? And then the responding officers, you would hope that they gloved up and, or as soon as they saw what they had, backed out. But it's a small police department, and they haven't had a homicide in Moscow since Idaho since 2015. So they may not be well versed on crime scene 101, but
Well, there was a lot of different agencies there. I saw through the media footage of the crime scene being processed through the window. There was representation from the state crime lab. There was the locals and the FBI. So
right.
they had,
But I'm talking about initially in the
yeah,
initial response.
right. I understand that, but I'm just saying, the one agency might not have had the a lot of practice in crime scene investigation, but they seem to have mutual aid agreements and have gotten help from outside. As for the initial response, yeah, as I said, you know, there's the Lacard exchange principle. We talked about this numerous times. When people, places, and things come in contact and then separate, they're going to leave bits and pieces of themselves as being present at that location, and they're going to take away from that location evidence that they from the location that shows that they were there. I hear people talking about, what if there was gloves? Well, if the perp depends on what type of glove. If the perp was wearing latex or nitrile lightweight gloves, and okay, so I mean, the hand could still slip on if there's no guard on the knife, and go forward and slice right through the glove and create bleeding. Um, there's still other aspects of this, and maybe the perp was wearing gloves. Let's say he was, and say he didn't leave any fingerprints, but that doesn't mean he still didn't leave his presence there. His hairs and fibers, any DNA shed from skin, saliva, whatever the case may be, or in the struggle with the victims, if they scratched his face or her face. We don't know if there was one suspect, there were two suspects. We don't know gender or sex. We don't know any of that.
So what I wanted to ask is, how do they determine who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in a scene like this? Is that difficult to determine, or is that process of, in other words, people who people have been talking that who knows who was involved in this? Could it have been the people who found them had something to do with it, or so what I'm saying is there a definitive way to kind of eliminate some of the good people who happen
Well,
to come on?
like I said, I would have to, first of all, get a list of all the officers that initially entered the scene. And then any latent fingerprints recovered from the scene will first be eliminated against those officers. They're compared against those officers and EMS, fire personnel, and law enforcement. Anybody that was in there. So you eliminate all those fingerprints as those 8 emergency responders prints. You eliminate them. And then the same thing for any DNA. If you gather up DNA samples, if they don't already have a database of DNA of the emergency responders, anybody that was there, if you collected DNA from the scene, then you go and get their DNA and have that eliminated.
Yep.
And it may even come. I mean, I have to tell you, there was one crime scene that I actually pulled hairs from emergency responders and submitted it to the lab, because I got to a crime scene in Manhattan, and I couldn't get into this apartment because it was so filled with crime, with emergency responders.
Ugh, yeah,
So I had to get all their names. I had to get, all their names and agencies and identification information. I had to take swabs, buccal swabs for elimination DNA, and I had to pull hairs. And it's
Wow.
not pleasant, and
No.
and they were not cooperative with me. But I said, hey, well, there shouldn't be 100 people in this little apartment.
Yeah, shame on that. And that's the thing, is that when I watched the footage, I saw a lot of people in and out of that residence, and we'll show it in a few. But I wanted to go fast forward. First, before we go fast forward, thank you, JLL, for the $100 super chat. Ed, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. There it is, Ed. Everyone's saying welcome back, and it was a long 2 weeks. People love the science as well. So,
Somebody asked a question earlier about the smell. Fresh blood, a lot of fresh blood, smells like rusted metal. If you know that smell,
I do.
very heavy iron presence in the air, and that's what it smells like initially. And then over time, and when putrefaction starts to set in, or the blood starts to separate into serum and plasma and so forth, and clotting, there's a different smell that comes.
Right. When I first noticed that smell that you speak about, the iron smell, when I was in the back of an ambulance, and it was a crime scene, like you said. Once they start working on the decedent or the victim, they'll transport. So I got in the back of an ambulance, and this person was bleeding profusely, and you smelled it. It was so strong. It's a distinctive smell. I wanted to fast forward quickly about these developing new story with tire tracks today, because everybody's talking about it. People are in the chat speaking about it. This is footage. Just tell the people what we're looking at here, Ed.
So you got a bunch of crime scene investigators, or maybe even accident reconstruction people, measuring the length of a tire tread mark left on this pavement. Now there's several marks here that you might see on the pavement, and it's suggestive of a vehicle at high rates of speed spinning the tires and leaving rubber down on this asphalt. It looks like in several directions, and so they're measuring. Now there's several measurements you're going to have to take. You're going to have to take the length, width, and then you have to measure between the inner portions of the tire, and then the from outer edge of tire impression to outer edge of tire impression, and you start to be able to develop different things like wheelbase, and then from the tire tread mark, if you can discern actual tread.
Is that what she's doing here, Ed? I don't mean to.
Well, she's just documenting now. She's putting an ABFO. She's putting a large L-shaped impression scale down on the ground. Usually we use those for footwear impressions and for tire impressions. And then she's going to take a series of photographs straight down. I normally put my camera on a tripod. I don't try to handheld these things. And then I go parallel to the surface. Your lens has to be parallel to that pavement. And then you put
the tripod there. See?
Yeah, you put your scales down, and then you take your overhead shot. And then what you do is you take your flash off your camera, and you take a series of oblique angled shots with the flash at different oblique angles, toe to heel, heel to toe, left side, right side. And you try to create three-dimensional photographs with the flash coming from different angles. And that's what they're doing right here now. It's Crime Scene Basics 101 for this type of evidence. And now,
a lot of our audience have no clue. They're like, what the hell are they doing here?
Yeah, exactly. See, they take the flash off. Now they're going to angle the flash and take a series of photos to try to cast shadows on the tire tread marks. So you can see the turn and the wheels were spinning. Now, some of these are known as yaw marks. Okay. And anyhow, getting back to that. So there's two types of evidence that are associated with this type of impression evidence, and it's class characteristics and then individualistic evidence. Now, the class characteristics, if there's enough tread information there, and they have the good measurements of the width and the tread, they can go into a database with the photographs and try to identify the manufacturer, make and model of the tire and the size. Okay. Now, if they took rubber samples off the pavement, if they were able to do that, then they can do an analysis of the rubber to see what the chemical makeup of the material left on the pavement was, to identify it further to a specific brand of tire. And then if there's enough defects in the tire, say the car was out of balance, or it was towed, or not towed, but there was a towing, what we call a tow. It was pitched to one side and was riding on one edge of the tire, or there was defects in it. And then once a lot of defects start getting into the tire, then the impression evidence becomes what we call individualistic, because it's going to be very rare that other tires will match, of the same make and model and size, will match defect wise.
Right.
So, and then have to have an tire impression expert look at that. Now, if they ever do get the vehicle involved in that, if these marks were left by a vehicle that was involved in this at all, we don't know that.
Right.
But if they ever do get that vehicle, and then they'll have to take impressions of all those tires. So what typically happens is we ink the tires, and we run the tires over clean paper.
When you say ink, that's like taking a tattoo impression.
Well, it's like inking your fingerprints.
Right.
Okay. So we're going to ink the whole tire on the car. You don't take the tires off the car. You jack up the car, and you lift the tire off the ground, and you ink the entire tire tread area. And then you run that over paper. You do all four wheels the same way. There's other ways of doing it. Like, one of the ways that I like to do it was I would coat the tire with PAM, cooking oil. Okay. And rub that down with a towel and get the whole tread surface oiled up with the PAM. And then I put the tire down on the paper, and then we roll the car over the paper to get the impression of all the tires. And then that oil absorbs into the paper, and then you take some magnetic fingerprint powder and you brush that across, and it gives you the impression of the tire. That's another way of doing it. So either you're using ink, fingerprint ink and a roller, and coating the tires that way, or you're doing it the way I said.
Right.
And then finally, if there's one specific section of the tire that stands out to the analyst as being the best to match to the impression found in the street, they may even cast it in dental stone, where they'll put the tire impression into a biofoam and create a three-dimensional image of it, and then pour dental stone material into it. The same stuff that the dentists use to take molds of your teeth.
Yeah, impressions. Hey, that's fascinating stuff, Ed. Forsakes Alive sends in a good question. Can they tell how long the tire tracks have been there?
Typically, unless there's some kind of video evidence, it's not going to be able to do that.
Right, to compare, right?
Right.
Yeah. There's so much to this, and I skipped forward because I thought that was important, because a lot of people were chatting about the tire impressions and so forth. It is a big, it's a great additional piece of evidence here, because, like you said, if they do in fact tie a vehicle into this through example, video surveillance going up that block, video surveillance leaving that block. And I'm referring to other people, because there's many residents all along the way, and we're going to show that in the next clip.
There's so many private security cameras these days, and Ring doorbells and
Right.
so forth, that
Right.
it's a possibility that some other resident nearby caught the vehicle leaving at the time, and so forth. And then again, you go back to the old standby. Start looking at the cell towers and see what phones were pinging in that area, and then track down those phones and their owners. And
and this all takes time. It takes a lot of personnel and work, and these things don't happen overnight. And that's why some people are getting frustrated. And it happens in all of these cases, Ed. People are, especially family members, are like, "Hey, we want to know what the hell happened here. What happened to our loved ones?"
If there was a fight, if it got physical with a couple of the victims fighting for their lives back, that interaction between the suspect and the victim are going to leave telltale evidence on both of them. So when he or she left the scene, the suspects leave the scene, suspect or suspects left the scene, there's going to be evidence of their presence taken away from the scene. So like fibers from the carpets or
Right.
things like that at the scene. And then whatever the victims were wearing and their hair and their DNA, their fingerprints could be on the victim,
Right.
on the suspect rather. And then conversely, the same with the victims. The suspect's evidence of that person's presence will be on them.
Right. And during the autopsy, the forensic pathologist and the rest of the staff that are in on the forensic side that are completing these exams are going to look underneath fingernails and so forth at, for any type of defensive the defensive wounds, and also fingernails of DNA underneath the fingernails of the female victims. Southwest 4x4 Explorers sent in a $5 super chat. And she says, so cool to hear how this happens and that it doesn't just happen in a 1-hour TV show. This is why it takes so long to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Amen.
So I saw another question earlier about how can you differentiate between bloodstains of a suspect versus a victim. Well, if the victim is on the ground and the suspect is vertical, and the suspect is bleeding, then those blood drops will be typically 90-degree drops, only being acted on by gravity unless there's some kind of artery damaged. And therefore, they will drop down and hit a surface, roughly at about 90 degrees and make a circular drop. Like for those of you who remember the O.J. Simpson case, and there were 90-degree blood drops on top of the bodies at that crime scene. And the only way that could have occurred is if the suspect was bleeding and standing on top of the victim, and the blood dropped on the victim's outer clothing from above. And that would tend to, looking at that, you would say, okay, maybe this is the suspects, and maybe the suspect is cut, and we need to look for somebody that has an injury, and take the blood samples there for DNA. But now back during OJ was at the beginning stages of America's use of DNA, and it required a lot of blood to get a genetic profile. It's not the case these days. We don't even need to we don't even need to see the blood or see the genetic materials. It's there.
Right. Hey, I wanted to play a little piece, if you don't mind, Ed, for us to take a little break from talking here. And I want to remind everybody in the audience, we are 2 retired New York City police detectives. Ed is a crime scene expert. He has so many different credentials in, all different types of analysis and so forth of crime scenes. He's a teacher now. He goes around the world teaching various different types of forensics and weapons of mass destruction and so forth. And Ed, again, is here with us on Crime Time with DutyRon. So if you are not yet subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button, giving us the thumbs up. Let's listen to a little piece from Court TV. Vinny had some conversation tonight with some of his guests, and we'll get into it and we'll come right back.
Correspondent Chanley Painter is joining us live tonight from outside that home. Chanley, you've been there all day, all night. What's happening?
Hey, Vinny, I have some new updates from when I was on with you last, and that is the photographers, the crime scene investigators still inside this home at the time, because we can literally see them through the second-story window in their crime scene suits. They cover themselves so they don't leave anything behind as they collect forensic evidence. We can see them up there on that second floor still working. But in the meantime,
Ed, what could they be doing up there almost 7 days later?
Well, it depends if they're doing a full bloodstain pattern analysis work up here. I mean, I once had a case where 4 women out of 5 were killed in a second-story apartment, just like this, in Queens over a bad drug deal. The guy came back to seek his revenge, and he rounded up the women and he put them in one bedroom, and one by one he took them out and he killed them and sexually assaulted them. And one woman is, jumped out of the second story window, broke her ankle, and saved her own life that way. But
Wow.
if, there's a lot of blood around. Like that crime scene I was just discussing had a lot of blood, and I had to do a lot of bloodstain pattern analysis. And unlike your CSI episodes, it takes a long time if you're going to start stringing blood stains to understand where the blood came from in 3 dimensions, and it takes a lot of math calculations, angle finding, and so forth.
And we see these red Solo cups on the windowsill. It looks like that could be a bedroom, or it could be, who knows. But
I mean, that means college kids, red Solo cups and college kids. They're
absolutely.
ubiquitous.
Come over to my backyard in the summer, and you'll see those red
They're
Solo.
probably playing, was it pong, beer pong?
Yeah, beer pong. There you go. I suck at that. But we see the crime scene detective technician in a tie-back suit, but we also see breathing apparatus. Can you see that well as I could see it, Ed? It looks like a full respirator type thing with look.
He's putting it on now, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a full, and he's not wearing it right, but that's besides the point. You put the hood down and you put the straps on first, and then you put the hood up. But that's okay, whatever. Yeah, it's a full face respirator with the cartridge system. So at this time,
goggles, and everything.
no, it's full face. It's got a face shield, the whole 9. But at this point, that's that blood and the. I hope that this is 7 days after.
Yeah, this was tonight.
This is tonight. Okay. So at this point, that place stinks to the high heavens. The bodies are not there; they're gone. But that blood is reeking right now. So I mean, I bet my bottom dollar that there's flies and maggots there now as well.
Ugh. Let's take a listen in and let's
floor
see.
Window light collect forensic evidence. We can see them up there on that second floor, still working. But in the meantime, the third floor, there was the middle window on the third floor. The light was on when I was live with you last. Now the light is turned off on the third floor. But before we noticed the third floor window light, the light turn off through the window, there were photographers up there, like we witnessed on your show just moments ago on the second floor, CSI taking photos, as we can see now on the second floor.
All right. So we see the lights flashing. She says they're taking photos. Ed, you talked about in the beginning days, photograph. What's the purpose? What's the reason? And I'm just throwing these questions at you. I kind of know the answers, but I want to hear it from you. Why are they 7 days later taking photographs?
Well, again, they're doing additional work now. I mean, there were photographs taken initially at the crime scene, and now they're back for maybe some more specific types of work. Maybe there's some bloodstain enhancements that are going on potential footwear. Maybe there's bloodstain pattern analysis. You have spatter all over the wall, not splatter, spatter.
Thank you.
All over the walls and the ceiling, and you might have cast off, because that's another thing, folks. When you stab somebody with a knife and bleeding starts, and then any blood gets on that knife blade, and every time you raise it and lower it, if you're swinging it, you're casting blood off of it in the directions that you're swinging. So if you swinging downward, after blood has gotten on the blade, you're going to be casting blood downward. If you're swinging upward, you're going to be casting blood backwards. Right. And so there could be blood on the walls, could be blood on the ceiling associated with the cast off. And then you can literally count the ups and downs of these cast off and get a determination of approximately how many swings occurred if you're using a blunt force instrument, or how many stab wounds occurred with this type of, and then you typically add 1 to start the initial bloodletting.
I want to let the audience know, even though we were off camera, when Ed was talking about that, he was actually doing this.
Yeah, back and forth.
Yep. So that's how it goes. And we heard some of the news reporters while you were away, Ed, speak about this. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday night. They were talking about that, because I believe that's when the autopsy results was released. It might have been Thursday. But yeah, Ray Kelly, who's a great friend of Profiling Evil and ours here, Ed, he's a drone pilot himself. He says no suspects yet, at DutyRon. There's potentially suspects that are not being mentioned or named, but no, nothing official at this time.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Speaking of suspects, I saw the initial press conference when I was over in Morocco. I saw the law enforcement speak and the college speak, and there were some things said in that press conference that I don't think should have been said. And I was like a little miffed why law enforcement would talk about this, because it would give, if the bad guy is watching, and they are,
Yeah.
right? They're going to want to know what law enforcement has and doesn't have, and they're going to look to see if law enforcement is going to slip and talk about things. Well, in this case, I thought law enforcement did slip and say some things that they shouldn't have said that could tip off the perp to dispose of certain things and get rid of evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that too, Ed, and I was really concerned. And they've made so many missteps in, like, even telling the public, "Hey, it's safe. This was a targeted crime. There's no need for public alarm." And that was coming from the mayor. And if that was a horrible political action, a political statement, it's ridiculous for me. Coming from a politician that's supposed to be there to make sure the public is safe. I was horrified by that when I heard that, and I just bit my tongue. Mystery Maven, thank you, Jess. $10 super chat. She says, I haven't seen any images / videos of evidence, identification markers on the exterior of the house / grounds for blood drops or anything in this type of crime scene. Does that strike you as unusual, Ed? Now, I did see stuff outside, but maybe Justice didn't see some of the things, but there wasn't a lot like out front.
Yeah, well, like I said, if they tracked a blood trail outside of a house, you would expect to see evidence markers and somebody taking photographs and collecting that kind of evidence, measuring it, scanning. You'd expect to see 3-dimensional scanners out there if they have them, or someone doing a basic crime scene sketch and measuring up where all this evidence is. I've had crime scene cases literally where, an hour or so old, and I get to the crime scene and there's a blood trail leading away from the crime scene that nobody followed. And my partner and I followed the blood trail and down the street. It was in Brooklyn. It went down Coney Island Avenue, right up a set of stairs, and then a bloody door handle, bloody into the foyer, a bloody door handle, blood on the floor, blood up the stairs, right to a door of an apartment. And we end up kicking the door in, and here's the perp with his hands bandaged, soaking his blood-soaked shoes in a 5-gallon bucket of bleach water. Jesus. And we were able to get the perp, cuff him, and pull the shoes out of the bucket before all the blood got destroyed.
Unbelievable. Canadian Cookie says, can the investigators determine who the killer murdered first? And we're going to have Barbara Butcher. She's in Florida. She's vacationing or seeing family, but she agreed to come on this week. And Ed, again, is going to be traveling. Ed's going to be traveling again.
I'll be back Tuesday. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll be back Tuesday.
All right. But please, after this, no more.
I'm going away. I'm going away the week after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, great. All right, Ed.
Well, you can contact me. I always have my studio.
Right, but when you're 6 hours ahead of us, at least that you'll be in the United States, I hope.
In December, no, I'm going to be in Indonesia.
Oh my God! All right, well, let's go. Let's continue on with this. Barbara Butcher can answer that question. I believe that that is difficult when you have 4 murders that that have happened in quick concession. It didn't happen. I believe it didn't happen over time, but we really don't know. Ed, is there a chance that this happened over a long time span, or you think it was something? I mean, I guess this would just be us talking now.
Well, if these two, the bedrooms that are involved here are on the same floor, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, on the second floor. Unless these people were knocked out, drag out, drunk, or drugged, or something like that, which doesn't appear to be the case if there's defensive wounds. Okay. You would think that, after the initial stab wound, if that didn't kill them initially, okay, especially if it's going through bedding and things of that nature, don't know how accurate these stab wounds are going to be initially if it's going through bedding, and that people would be screaming and yelling and moving, and there'd be disturbance, things would get knocked over, that people would hear this on the second floor at least.
Right.
I understand there was occupants of the basement that didn't hear this, which is not unusual. Just think back to the Queens case where the mother was murdered in the basement of her house, and her son was up in the attic.
Right.
Didn't hear it. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Anything's possible, and a lot of the information's not being put out concisely. There's people who are saying, "Oh, it's on the third floor, it's in the basement." Again, until there's an official press conference of exact locations, the news reporting, and that's all. Ladies and gentlemen in the chat, we can only go by what's being released. So we don't know officially every bit of this. I'm going to just play the rest of this because I want to get this out before we're done. This is coming in from Court TV.
So they're still actively working this scene. They've been here all floor, CSI taking photos, as we can see now on the second floor, they're taking photos. So they're still actively working this scene. They've been here all day long. It's been roped off with crime scene tape. We see the victim's vehicle still parked out front. We've seen investigators walk in and out of the front door of this home carrying giant boxes, I presume full of evidence. On the backside, we witnessed investigators, of course, taking out evidence from the back door, which is the second floor of this house, through a sliding door. They were actually dusting for fingerprints on the back window pane next to that sliding door. And this is almost a week after 4 University of Idaho students were found brutally murdered inside this home. And what we've been hearing in the report, what's being reported, is that 2 of the victims were on the second floor, where we see now the crime scene investigators collecting forensics, and on the 3rd floor of this home is where they were actually located. We're also learning some new details from the Moscow Police Department this evening. They're confirming that, of course, the 4 murdered inside were stabbed to death multiple times while they were likely asleep. Some had defensive wounds. Maybe they heard what was going on and woke up. We don't know, but we're confirming there's no sign of any sexual assault or what maybe some have speculated as motive in this crime.
It was Goncalves.
Also, there were 2 surviving roommates in this multi-room home that were unharmed, and the detectives have ruled them out. They believe that the 2 surviving roommates and a young man that is seen in video at the food truck where 2 of the victims were hours before their death, they've ruled them out. They are not involved in this crime. Additionally, we learned from the police this evening that any rumors that these victims had been tied or gagged, that was not accurate. They still, though, aren't releasing who called 911, because they're saying that these murders happened around maybe 3 or 4 a.m. last Sunday morning. Police were not called until noon, and they arrived to this home with the front door wide open. They've released that there's no signs of forced entry in this home. And when we've been here, we've noticed that the front door has a door handle with a security code lock pad that some sense of maybe security here at the home, but they say no forced entry. And it's still no murder weapon found. Still no suspect or suspects named. We know that the dumpsters that are to my right and left here at the home, they've collected items. They did mention that. And they also are confirming that they've contacted local businesses here to determine if a fixed blade knife had been recently purchased. The Idaho Statesman had talked to a local hardware owner store, and he says that the police were in town asking about some kind of combat style or Rambo style knife blade. That's just so scary to think about here, Vinny. And this happened here. I've been out in the town talking to people and neighbors without any arrest and really not much info from the authorities. Many people are still on edge and in fear, have left town. I've talked to the neighbors. I know I spoke with one with you live on air just an hour ago, but we've spoken to more since we've been out here. They say that, this is just steps from the University of Idaho campus. A lot of students live here. And so as you can imagine, the parties happen here. We're less than a block from Fraternity Row on campus, where two of the victims were at a party before their deaths. So the neighbors say that, it's usual to have parties in this area at this home where the crime scene is. And it's not unusual to hear people excited or screaming or, just being loud. The neighbor I talked to earlier said they just put on a fan, they drown out the noise and they go to sleep. So it is unusually quiet here, and people are being more cautious, not only here in this area, but on the campus. Students have gone home for the Thanksgiving holiday, and you can definitely see, Vinny, the increased security, not just of the campus police and Moscow police, but state police here, as well as the FBI, are inside this home right now, and private security. The campus has hired private security as well.
I could understand. And again, you're looking at live pictures, folks. This is inside the murder house. You've got photographers with their protective gear on that are taking pictures of the murder scenes. This is a 3-level house, as Chanley has told us. The murders, we believe, took place on the 2nd and 3rd floor. That second level can be accessed from ground floor behind the home. From this side where Chanley is, that front door kind of goes to the lower level, the basement level. Chanley describing it.
So there we have it, Ed, 2nd and 3rd floor.
It appears the house is on a hill, and so the ground floor in the front of the house is low, and then the topography of the land grades upward, where the 2nd floor in the back of the house has an entrance, and then the 3rd floor is above grade. Interesting. So the 2nd and 3rd floor, and yeah, everybody's interested in who was stabbed first. I'm also interested to see if, in terms of alcohol and toxicology in the system, what was in these victims' systems. Where I know some of them were at a food truck, and they were interacting with somebody at the food truck. There's photo evidence of this. Again, and then a car service took individuals home. So again, they're going to have to track down the car service people and interview them. They're going to have to track down the person in the photograph at the food truck. All of that has to be looked at. But yes, there was another thing that I saw in the chat, that defensive wounds doesn't necessarily mean that they put up a fight. That's correct. You can be in bed and start to get stabbed, and then you put your hands out to block, some of the blows, and then, not necessarily, getting out of bed and then fighting per se, but you just put your hands out to block an assailant's attack on you, and therefore you get cuts to your hands, your fingers, maybe your arms, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I'm just showing a little bit of footage in the daylight of the different little snippets of different parts of this location. And here you have a female in the back of a vehicle looking at a laptop. I'm not quite sure what people were asking. Hey, what do you think they're doing here? But they're definitely looking at some data, whether it's department data, police department data.
Well, it could be images. It could be photographs. It could be they're doing a 3D laser scan, and they're operating the laser scanner via Bluetooth from outside. Things like that. I've done that before as well. So
a lot of questions come into DutyRon.com, Ed, about these red containers. You see there's the two stacked boxes there, and then it looks like a white container with plastic packaging. Is this blood collection or evidence collection here?
Well, it could be, if that in fact is the crime scene people's equipment there. I definitely see the evidence tote. It looks like a mail tote, the white plastic bin there. And then the others, yeah, you can see that. That's a part of a rolling crime scene kit. It comes in sections.
Right here.
Yeah.
They were stacked.
And the cooler, could be any number of evidence you put in there to keep cool, such as blood evidence.
There's a sliding glass door. It looks like on the first floor.
Yeah, it looks like there was evidence tape on it too that seems to be broken now. Maybe it was put across the jamb.
Right.
And I didn't hear anything about any signs of forced entry. If that door was damaged, pried open or whatever the case may be, I didn't hear any information about that.
Right. So these are, you can see the crime scene tape right here going along the wall.
Yeah.
And this is,
Yeah, there's probably
Um,
another property on the other side of that they didn't want the neighbors to cross over.
right. And that was the front view right here. This is the front door,
Right.
1122. And again, this is from, I think, a day or two ago, but I just wanted to show it because I thought it was interesting for people to see. There's just a lot of work that continues to be going on here as well as tonight. Right up until now, 7 days later. So, yeah, I wanted to go to the chat if you don't mind, Ed, and look at a couple of the questions because there's so many things here. Boxing MMA. Here's Gary from Ireland. He's on Twitch, so we're for the first time today and tonight we're broadcasting live on Twitch. Now,
Hold on, let me get this.
okay.
I got to answer this one. How could blood get on the outside of a foundation? Well, if blood is getting on the outside of the foundation, you got to understand that house isn't built very well. If the sill plate is allowing that kind of liquid to flow through it, then air is getting through. So the house isn't really wrapped tight to be airtight. And typically, you put a pressure treated sill plate on the base with some caulking adhesive, and it's bolted down to the foundation, and then the framing sits on top of it for a wood frame house. So it's not very good workmanship in terms of residential construction that this is happening.
Yeah, and there's a photo of what Ed's talking about right there. Gruesome, graphic. It puts it right in perspective of how much blood was lost. And somebody asked in the chat, and that's coming back into my head, how would these victims lose so much blood? What type of wound would do that? I know we have the carotid artery in.
Well, yeah. Well, any number of arterial cuts could produce something like this. There's, femoral artery in the leg is one source of heavy bleeding. Carotid artery.
That's towards the hip area, right?
It's towards the inner thigh. Okay, by the groin, just around that area, and then any type of the carotid arteries, any of those types of injuries, and see that's another thing too. That's going to create a specific type of bloodstain patterns called arterial spatter, and it kind of resembles an EKG. It gives you you can actually see the peaks and valleys of like an EKG because you have two beats of the heart, the diastolic and systolic beats, and you'll get different pressures that are asserted on the blood vessels, on the veins, the arteries rather, when that occurs, and so you have those kind of stain patterns, and the blood is being acted on by the pumping of the heart. So it's a force greater than gravity, and it kind of sprays a long distance to create these patterns when it hits a vertical surface. And again, if the person is now laying down in the corner of that wall by that outside concrete foundation, and that blood is just seeping through all of that and getting out, it's really remarkable.
Yeah. Hey, I'm looking on Facebook, Ed, for the Moscow Police Department, and I heard that there's some updates there. So I want to try to see if there's anything. Yesterday at 2 p.m. Update, further investigation. This is yesterday. I don't see anything. November 19th at 6 p.m. Here's the 6:15 p.m. update, and I'm going to take myself off. hold on a second. Let me see if I can add this. Okay, here it is. All right, I'm going to take us both off, but we'll still be on audio. It says Moscow, Idaho. The Moscow Police Department is providing the following information to update the public on the known facts surrounding the 4 murders that occurred on November 13th in Moscow, Idaho. Updated information. At this time, detectives have investigated the private party driver who took Kaylee and Madison home on November 13th and do not believe he is involved in this crime. Detectives believe that on November 12th, the 2 surviving roommates had been out in the Moscow community separately, but returned home by 1 a.m. The 2 did not wake up until later on November 13th. Initially, the 911 call made at 11:58 a.m. Sunday morning on November 13th requested aid for an unconscious person. The call was made from inside the residence on one of the roommates' cell phones. The Moscow Police Department arrived shortly thereafter and found all 4 victims. Detectives confirmed the victims were located on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the residence, and detectives are aware of multiple phone calls from victims Madison and Kaylee to a male. This information is part of an ongoing investigation. Detectives are seeking all outside surveillance video taken from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. on Sunday, November 13th, 2022, from businesses and residents within the geographical area below. Detectives are requesting all available video, whether there appears to be motion or content or not. Tips, pictures, and videos can be submitted, and there's a tip line. I will link that down below in the description. And they say the area is West Taylor Avenue, North Boundary, West Pole House Road, River Drive, and it just goes on to list all these locations. There'll be a news conference on the public investigation Sunday, November 20th at 3 p.m. I will cover that. University of Idaho Alumni Lounge. Media note, please all do. Yep. Okay, so the rest of this is just a narrative. And there's a little bit more additional information. I will link this down below in the description so you guys can go read it. This is straight from the Moscow Police Department's Facebook page. There's quite a bit more on here. I'll highlight this original information. And this is just redundant that we've already had put out there. And they talk about things pertaining to the case. Anything you see in the chat, Ed? I see you're working the switchboard.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, a knife attack is typically something very personal, and now it tends to denote contact or a relationship between individuals. And given what they're saying about these phone calls from the 2 girls to this one individual, I find that very interesting. They have to run that down, and there's a whole psychological forensic study on stab wounds, and there is it happens a lot between lovers, disgruntled lovers, and there's an entire study on this as it being a personal and sexual act of when someone is stabbed, especially, there tends to be, in the beginning of a stabbing with rage, there tends to be disorganized, and the stabs wounds are everywhere. And towards the end of a horrific stabbing, the person doing the stabbing then becomes a little bit more organized, and then the stab wounds develop a specific pattern that can be discerned in the victim's body. It's quite interesting to see when it does occur, because I have had that happen. And towards the end of like a horrific stabbing with multiple stab wounds, say over 20, towards the end, then all of a sudden I see this circular pattern develop of stab wounds in a specific area. And that the forensic psychiatrist or psychologist said was the person that was doing the stabbing breaks out of the rage and frenzy and becomes more organized, and then realizes what they're doing and stops thereafter.
Wow. And you know, that's fascinating because a lot of people don't have that information. And I know that's through your studies that you know that, and you're putting that out there as viable information. And here's JLL, and we missed this one, Ed. Can I say something? Is there anything Ed doesn't know? He's so smart. I concur
Well,
wholeheartedly. That's from JLL.
all I'll say is this, to answer that question. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
Oh my. Kathy from Texas. Kathy is from Texas. She sends a $20 super chat in as well and says, thank you, gentlemen, for this informative live stream. I have some photos from Instagram from Kaylee's account, and I believe I saved a couple of photographs. I just want to share it with you guys because, you know, we always want to remember the victims and support the families. And here's all the girls together. And the two surviving girls are in on this shot here. And this is on her public Instagram page. And these pictures we saw on the news, this one here in particular, as the young man who also was a victim as well. Is just horrible. You don't wish this on your worst enemies, right?
You know, there's a continued question in here about is it possible to tell the sequence? It could be possible, yes. You know, the first person gets stabbed, and the bloody weapon is then moved towards the next victim. Okay, and so there could be a blood trail leading from one victim to the next victim, and now there could be blood stains that are left from the bloody knife after attacking the second victim that will have a combination of the two victims, the first and the second victim. So if there's a blood trail that leads away from the second story, say, to the third story, I don't know where the attacks occurred. Let's just say this, for instance. After you attack the first person, you have a blood trail that kind of leads to the second person, and the blood is identified. The blood trail is identified to the first victim by DNA. Then the second victim gets attacked, and now there's a mixture of DNA from the first and the second victims, and there's a blood trail that leads away from that person to the third victim. So if you can see where I'm going with this, then there's a potential for that to occur. Now, there was a question about if there's a mixture of blood, can you extract or separate? No, you don't separate. What ends up happening is all the genetic profiles will be done of the individuals, and then if their suspect is involved as well, and there's a commingling of all four suspects, all four victims rather, and the suspect, then what typically happens is you'll get a report that says victims 1, 2, 3, and 4, and suspects' genetic profiles cannot be eliminated as the source of this mixed bloodstain. Basically, what they're saying is, yeah, we believe that this mixed bloodstain is all 5 of these people, the perpetrator and the 4 victims.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that, Ed. I mean, I saw that question come in over and over again. So that is definitely something that people are interested in. And there's so much more to this. There's so much more that it's not going to be released to us about what happened. But I wanted to play this and then we'll wrap, Ed, and then you got to talk a little bit about something before we go. This is a reporter who I highlighted last night. She did a fantastic job. She went into her car and she drove the route from the grub truck, the grub trucker, the guy on Twitch. She rode that route, and we got a good view of the exact route that these two young ladies got in the car. And we found out it's not an Uber car. It was a private transportation. So I want to play this so you guys can all see it and hear it. I thought it was brilliant that she did this.
Are still trying to piece together where the 4 University of Idaho students went the night before they were found in their Moscow home, stabbed to death. Investigators are hoping the map released today will provide additional tips from the community.
The map details the night of Saturday, November 12th into the early hours of Sunday, November 13th. It highlights locations and approximate times when Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen were in downtown Moscow, while Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle were at the Sigma Chi house. Investigators believe Madison and Kaylee were at the Corner Club on Saturday from 8 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Sunday. Then they were at the grub truck on Main Street at 1:40 a.m. 5 minutes later, the map says they returned to their home on King Road. I drove that route this afternoon, starting at 4th and Main and ending at the King Road home. With some light traffic on the road, I arrived at the house in about 3 minutes. This suggests it's reasonable to believe Madison and Kaylee traveled by car from the food truck, but that detail has not been confirmed by police. Investigators also say Ethan and Xana were at a party at Sigma Chi from 8 to 9 p.m., then returned to the home on King Road at 1:45 a.m. The fraternity is a short 3-minute walk from the house, but still, there is a 5-hour gap on their location between the party and arriving at home. Investigators hope someone might remember being at or near the locations they've identified around the same time and potentially saw something suspicious or relevant to the investigation. Police are asking those people to call the tip line or email with that information.
This is all good information, but it brings up even more questions, such as, did investigators use the students' cell phones to identify the locations and times on this map? Did Madison and Kaylee walk or drive or get a ride back to the home? And did Xana and Ethan spend only 1 hour at the Sigma Chi fraternity? I have several calls into Idaho State Police and other local authorities working this investigation. I have not heard back, but we will continue to press for answers as this story develops. Reporting in Moscow, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Amanda,
I don't know. What did you think of that, Ed? She drove that route. It was pretty interesting to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, from a visual perspective, and time perspective as well.
Yeah. Somebody asked in the chat, Ed, how long will it take to process this entire crime scene? Were we going to be looking at this for weeks to come, or, I mean, is there a time when you're going to get nothing more out of this thing? I mean, here we are 7 days later; they're still in there, taking photographs, collecting potential evidence and stuff.
Well, if new information arises or new details emerge from, let's say, the autopsies, and then the medical examiner say, "Hey, could you go back and look for this, or look, see if there's evidence of this or that?" So it's they keep going. 7 days out, they're still back there. Um, I'm only assuming that they're, like I said, they're developing new information, like the tire tracks.
Right.
I mean, was that not noted the first day, or did they not? Did they pay it no mind until additional information came in from neighbors, or I heard tires screeching at a certain time, and they're just getting that information, go back there, and they find evidence of something to match that?
Right. It could be based on interviews from detectives going door to door. Hey, I heard screeching of a tire at such hour. And in these interviews, they said that lots of these kids who reside in that area went home out of fear. And can you blame them? I mean, I wouldn't want my kid there. I would go there and scoop them up and bring them back home, real quick. This home is listed not for sale, but is on Zillow. And I took the liberty of going onto Zillow and looking at some of these photos. And this is the inside of the kitchen. I'm going to go through these quick because everyone's asking me to show these, not here in the chat, but I've been getting so many messages. So there's 23 photos. This comes from Team Idaho Real Estate and Property Management. These are just the various rooms within the house. This looks like upstairs. You can tell by the trees outside. Yep. And there's the
sliding door to the backyard.
Yep.
From a security standpoint, those are notorious.
Say again?
I said from a security standpoint, sliding glass doors are always a weak point for residents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is a look from the rear. Now you can see, this is what I was talking about. If you look out these sliding glass doors, these are residential homes where, might not all be occupied by students. And you hope and pray that one or multiple locations like this all around, they had to have cameras, and I'm hoping and praying that there was cameras and they caught something.
Yeah, you couldn't get in and out of my house or past my house, both on the water or on the street, without being videotaped on my cameras.
Right. There's a bathroom. Here's a bedroom. This is a small bedroom. This is on.
So, Unsolved Crimes Uncovered wants me to explain why sliding glass doors are notoriously weak for security of a house. There's another set right there. It's because they can their locking mechanisms aren't that secure, and there are easy ways to take them off their tracks and remove a door panel to get in. If there's many aftermarket security devices that are made for these types of doors to put in place after you install them to try to shore up the security of them so people can't break in. But they have time and time again, people don't do that. They don't secure them properly. They don't go out and buy the extra locking mechanisms. And people end up having residential burglaries gain access through those locations.
Right. Tina Garrett says, at DutyRon, neighbors have cameras. Well, if that in fact is the truth, which I'm sure it is, that's a great thing. This looks like the third floor, Ed, because you see here, this is the attic.
Yeah, it appears to be the attic.
Yeah, so this is the third floor location. So what we were just looking at these last few slides were potentially these are the crime scene. This is the layout inside. This looks like a shower here.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the third floor bedroom. God. Just going to go through these quick. This is the first floor. That's that first floor.
Yeah, and there's a deck up there.
Yep. All right. So those are the 23 photos. Let's look through to the chat and we'll wrap it up. Ed, you wanted to talk a little bit about, you got your pilot's license, huh? You drone pilot. You want to talk? I'll go full screen with you.
Yeah, folks, if you're interested in becoming a private pilot or a commercial pilot, or if you already are a pilot and you're interested in getting your instrument certification, or you're interested in becoming a commercial drone pilot, I highly recommend this school, Pilot Institute. And you can do all your training book-wise. Not obviously, you have to take your flight lessons, but do all your training online with this company, relatively inexpensive and worth every penny.
Outstanding. And I'm glad that you were able to get your certification, your license through them. You did that right before you went overseas. So that was great. Hey, Natalie says, do you think the perp definitely left his own blood? I guess that's for you, Ed.
Odds are with this amount of stabbings, this amount of victims, it's a high probability that there was some injury sustained. And it wouldn't be surprising if the blade broke and is recovered inside one of these victims, or at least a portion of the blade. That tends to happen a lot with multiple stab wounds victims. Again, from time to time, you're going to insert a knife into an individual, you're going to hit bone.
Yeah.
And so depending on the quality of the blade, those blades break.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, only time will tell on what they put out. And Go Find Me says, could a woman have done this? Could a woman have done it? Yes. Is it probable that a woman did this? No, I don't think so. But you never know. You can't say yes or no because we don't have an identified perpetrator. So thank you for that question. That's a good one. Yeah. I think we're good, Ed. I want to say this for those of you who are new and first time watching Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are retired New York City police detectives. If you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, consider hitting that red subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up because that helps to get it out there into the algorithm. Share this out onto your social media platforms. And remember, there's a lot of information that swirls out there on the internet superhighway. Even the news media puts out information and the police department puts out information. These cases are ongoing and things change day to day, minute to minute, second to second. Ed and I can both tell you, we've seen this happen in all different kinds of cases and different magnitudes of cases. So, be very careful about, absorb the information, but really look at it, read day to day updates and so forth. But I say this, and Ed, you could correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm looking for updated information, I want to see that information come out from the authorities. A lot of times the news media gets it from them and then they put it out. So look for the authorities. Go follow this Facebook page for the Moscow Police Department. I am following it. I think you'll get as clear and concise information as possible. And we're going to have Barbara Butcher on either Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day is good for Ed. And we are going to talk about the medical exams on all four of these victims and what to potentially be looking for, what her thoughts are from the medical examiner's perspective. And I think that'll be a fascinating show. Monday night, I'm going to have the lawyer that Peter Tragos from Tragos Law. He's going to be joining us to talk about the charges against Jared from Adventures with Purpose. So look for that broadcast at 8:00. Ed has got the excusal on that one because he'll be traveling. So
It's Monday night. Monday night, I'll be in LSU campus, Baton Rouge.
Ed, it's all good. You got stuff going on. And it was funny. Amelia said in the chat, are you having a lover's quarrel with Ed Wallace, DutyRon? Yes, I am.
You said that. And meanwhile, people here said we were going through a bromance.
Yeah, it is a bromance. I'll admit to that. No, but Ed Wallace, again, he has to travel. I'm just breaking his chops. I know that business comes first, and this is part of his business, and this is what he does. I want to just take a moment to send prayers, strength, and positive vibes to these victims' families. Moms and dads are mourning 20 and 21-year-olds. These four have been ripped away from their families at the holiday season. There's no good time for this to happen, obviously, but we have to be aware that there's so many people affected by this, and we got to send them strength and do our best to keep this respectful and also get information out in regards to their loved ones' cases. Schmitty has got a little comment. Ed Wallace, no carpeting in the apartment. There was no. I read on the news, East Idaho management, that it was recently renovated and there's no carpeting in that location.
Yeah, you saw the flooring in there. I don't necessarily think it's more difficult for a crime scene investigation. We don't know if there was. I don't doubt there was any attempts to clean this up or kind of mop up the crime scene or something like that. That evidence would stick out more on a wood floor than it would on a carpet. No, not necessarily. It just depends on where this investigation is going in terms of looking underneath the carpeting or looking underneath the flooring. If they have to do something like that, I'm not sure. It's difficult to answer that question because it all depends on like blood trails throughout the house and throughout the apartment and so forth. I'd have to look that up. Did you address the blood on the outside of the house? Mo Mouse says, yes, I did. If you look, if you rewind the video here later when it's on YouTube, you see that I addressed that the blood on the outside of the house and how that could occur.
Right. And I wanted to clear up one other thing too, is the phone calls, the flurry of phone calls that I read off in the last live stream. Kaylee called 6 times at 2:26 to 2:44, and then from 2:44 to 2:52, there's more calls to Jack. It turns out Moscow police, according to them, that is one of her ex-boyfriends that they were on again, off again, and they were deciding to take a break. But she frantically called her ex, and that's those phone calls that were going on between 2:44 and finally ending at 2:52 a.m.
But that was both cell phones, her and her girlfriend's.
Yeah. It says Maddie and then Kaylee calls Jack. So again, I have a video. It's 2 minutes long. I don't know if it's worth playing it, but I think everybody gets the idea. Sassy Patriot, thank you so much for the super love. And guys, again, if you are watching on the replay, thank you to the replays viewers. We love the replay viewers. Thank you for leaving comments down below for me and Ed, because what happens is that's a great way to continue the conversation after the video is over. So for my Twitch viewers, my Facebook viewers, the YouTuber viewers, and the Twitter live viewers, leave us comments. Let us know. We like to continue conversations, and that's how it happens. And that's what's great about YouTube, is you can continue the conversation after the video is over. I think there's a lot more that we'll hear about this. We're going to cover it. We're going to cover these cases. Yes, interviews are going on. Interviews lead to other places. If interviews lead to sometimes interrogations, and I hope that they have an arrest sooner than later, because this whole community, forget about just the college kids, think about the people who live within that community. There's just the holidays. You got people who are stopping their lives because they don't know, is this murderer or murderers out there? So it's really a horrible situation to be in. The calls were unanswered because the ex-boyfriend said he was sleeping. So if you want to read that, you can go. I'm going to link the article down below, and you guys can go and read it. Snug with Pug sends in a thank you to Ed Wallace. Appreciate that. How's Kara doing?
Kara's doing good. Hold on. You want me to get her?
Yeah, because
All right, hold on.
She's a fan favorite. All right, Ed's going to get Kara. I'm going to be solo. Hey, guys and girls, I just want to say this.
Kara.
I want to say thank you
Kara.
to each and every one of you for all of your support and the positivity that you have with engaging with Ed and I on Crime Time with DutyRon. You guys are, again, what makes this a great place.
Come here.
Thank you. Thank you. While Ed is getting mauled by Kara, I'm going to put him back on the screen. He's picking her up, or trying to. Let's see.
Okay.
What do we got here? Let's go full screen with you.
Hold on.
Ed's got the show. There's Kara. She probably missed you so much.
Oh my God, she attacked me yesterday when I came home, and she scratched me. Come here, Kara. Kara, come here. Kara, come here. Come here. Come here, girl. Come here.
So this is Ed's pup.
Here she is. Say hi. Give me a kiss. Thank you.
Ed's getting kisses. I love it. Awesome. Hey, I've got my 14-year-old dachshund, my little hot dog. When I leave the house, we went out to my brother's 60th birthday party tonight, and we were out at a 60th. We were out for like 3 or 4 hours. When we came home, he's running around in circles like a madman, just so happy that me and my wife came home. So it's awesome. So again, I'm going to wrap it up with you guys tonight. Ed's checking the chat for comments about the dog. There we go. Ed's back.
I don't know, Christopher, you have a great eye for detail on it. I couldn't believe you saw a tattoo on my back. Did anybody else see that? How'd you see that, Christopher? Where'd you see it?
I think when she came up, she ripped a little bit.
That's right.
See it up at the top.
I have 2 tattoos on my back.
And what are those tattoos, Ed?
One is my family crest from Scotland, and the other are words that say in Latin. It says, I'm having a brain fart right now. Can you believe it?
It happens.
Fortune favors the brave.
There you go.
In Latin.
Well, I know that you got a tattoo recent. That's the one you got recently. That statement.
That one, yeah, that one I got in Iraq.
Nice. Dreamcatcher has 4 of those hot dogs. They're balls of fire. They just run around like mad men and women. So, yeah, dachshunds are great. The hot dogs, they just love to sit in your lap and give you a lot of love. So, it's awesome.
It's Kara with a C.
There you go. Ed, your door just got shut. Your wife's like, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't want to hear it.
She's telling me, get off. It's time for Kara to go to bed, and I'm in her bedroom.
All right, guys and girls, as I always like to end these, thank you so much for being here. God bless the world. God bless the United States of America, and God bless each and every one of us here in the chat, but especially these 4 victims and their families. We send them strength, prayers, and positive vibes. And remember, reach out to your loved ones, hug them, make contact with them, and make sure you are aware of your surroundings at all times. Ed, what you got? What do you got for the audience?
Remember, this is also the holiday season. Check in on those you haven't heard from in a while. It is Thanksgiving. Let's all give thanks and praise for our lot in life. Again, international travel teaches me so much about how good we have it here in the United States. I was doing a live with Ron when the electricity went out, and here in the United States, people take electricity for granted. Okay, but my usual, though, going back to my usual, stay safe, stay prepared, and watch your 6.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed. Peace, everybody, and good night from New York. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you.